Welcome to the MultiCultural Mindset broadcast. Your host is Dr. LaVerne Hanes Collins, a licensed professional counselor, award-winning trainer, and keynote speaker. Dr. Collins is the author of Overlooked: Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. Dr. Collins has also been a featured monthly columnist in the American Counseling Association's Counseling Today magazine with her Honoring Diversity column. Now, here's Dr. Collins.
Hello and welcome to the Multicultural Mindset. Today we are leaning into a tender but really urgent mental health conversation. And that's the experience of Black caregivers caring for loved ones with dementia or other disabilities. Let me give you 4 facts to consider before we get into the conversation. Black Americans are about twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease or related dementias compared to non-Hispanic whites. Second thing, among Black Americans aged 70 and older, approximately 21%, that's about 1 in 5. 1 in 5 Black Americans aged 70 or older live with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Third point, Black caregivers face a particularly high burden because 57% of Black family caregivers report that they provide at least 30 or more hours per week of care, at least 30 or more hours. That is a full-time job, everybody. That's a full-time job, in addition to whatever other full-time jobs they may have. And then number 4 is that when it comes to respite services, those are the supported times of breaks and rest and relief that caregivers can have. Black dementia caregivers are 69% less likely to use respite care compared to white caregivers. So put all that into context and consider that for many in the Black and African American communities, in-home caregiving is not seen as an optional responsibility. It's often seen as a cultural expectation. It's like a sacred duty, an obligation. And yet behind the love and behind the devotion, there's exhaustion, there's financial strain, and there's unspoken grief. And way too often, the needs of Black caregivers go overlooked, unseen in our healthcare system, and unsupported in our larger society. So this is a critical conversation to have. And to help us talk about this, my guest today is my good friend, Jade Irving. Jade is a full-time in-home caregiver to her mother, in addition to a full-time employer. She's a manager in corporate America, and she's navigating these waters every day. So, Jade, welcome to the Multicultural Mindset. I'm so glad to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to be here today.
Well, I know you know this stuff inside out. You know it firsthand. And that's you're the person that I wanted to help me tell this story. Um, I've known you for years now, and I've watched your journey. Let me ask you to just share with our audience, what was your personal journey of becoming a caregiver for your parent?
So, the story with me is that a couple of years ago, actually back in the spring of 2022, I awoke to a voicemail that my mom was being taken to the ER, and that it appeared that she was having or had had a stroke. So I wasn't living in the state that my mom was in. I flew home to my home state of South Carolina where she was as soon as I could see her in the hospital. And I haven't left South Carolina since. So she spent weeks in the hospital, followed by a year and a half in a nursing home, as she did end up having significant paralysis after her stroke, like on her left hand side. So she did lose the ability to like stand and to walk. She's essentially wheelchair bound now. But not so coincidentally, things did happen to align in my life in a way that allowed me to therefore become a caregiver to her. I've been blessed with remote work since 2017. I don't have familial obligations because I'm single. I don't have any kids. I've been a lifelong renter, so I wasn't leaving like a house behind or tied to a mortgage or tied to any particular place. So I'd essentially shown up back here in my home state of South Carolina to become a caregiver to her and never left. So I moved her in to live with me in September of 2023 out of her nursing home. And that's where the journey together kind of
That's where
began.
you are now. You
Yeah,
literally on a dime had to pivot. You had to shift your whole life, move, and start life not just as a daughter, but as a daughter who was giving care on a full-time
absolutely.
basis, essentially. Yeah. So what
Yeah.
were your first thoughts? What were your first emotions, feelings when you realized that your mother would need long-term care?
For a while, it was just numb. Like I felt like I was living in this alternate reality that I was gonna wake up from someday. It didn't seem real. Even now, I have a really hard time kind of like recalling what the exact emotions were that I was experiencing. But after the initial shock wore off after some time, thinking back, I think I now know and can more easily identify that the range of emotions I have experienced and to some extent continue to experience as a caregiver now. I like to say I try to find balance though, like between acknowledging the challenging emotions I've experienced with gratitude because there are so many different emotions that I think have come out of this experience and continue to come out of it. I would say probably the major like emotion I have experienced is grief for
Mm,
certain, like grief and loss. Like I'm someone who grieves my mom's losses, which have come in a lot of different forms since her stroke, like physical losses, she's had social losses, emotional and spiritual impacts, and ambiguous grief in particular is something I've never quite experienced before becoming, a caregiver. And that's something that it's a kind of grief that you experience when you're mourning the loss of someone who's actually still alive, still here, but they're suffering from losses and so are you. And it's a really different kind of loss. Um, Throughout all of the grief I've experienced at the same time, what's interesting is I'm now more grateful than ever. For instance, I'm grateful um, for my mom's ability to still be able to speak, as maybe before her stroke, I took for granted, I think, being able to just make a call to my mom and have a conversation with her or text her and her be able to respond back to me. I saw people in the nursing home she used to live in that had lost their ability to speak. So now although I experience grief, I cherish that I can like share a laugh with my mom now more than I ever have. And so I'm, really grateful to God for that. And I must say, I can't mention grief without also mentioning anxiety because um, I've had anxiety for a long time. I've had it for many years, way before my mom had her stroke. And, as a caregiver, I would say it's definitely been exacerbated for many reasons, for more than one. And I think it's because some days are really just better than others, to be
yeah.
honest. So um, I think perhaps there's this sense of unpredictability when being a caregiver that kind of looms in the background, in the back of my mind, like all the time. And it gives me kind of a foreboding mindset, so to speak. And I don't think I've ever even said this out loud before, but it's kind of like I would describe it as a fearful apprehension is what underlies the anxiety. To give an example, the experience of just visiting and seeing and witnessing my mom in the hospital post-stroke and seeing her paralyzed and coming to the point of our lives where we are together now, it has subconsciously made me fearful and anxious of her having another stroke. I have anxiety of any major event happening where she's hurt now, or any major event happening where I'm hurt. Now I'm not able to provide the care for her that I want to continue doing, right? So I can go on and on, but when you're a caregiver, you have like this list. It's like this ever growing, never reduced list of things that you constantly having to do, right? And part of the reason for that is because, you're taking on the things that the person you're caring for would do if they could do it themselves. And so it can be anxiety inducing alone. Honestly, just trying to balance, your loved one's needs with your own needs and responsibilities. So that creates a lot of anxiety too. For me, therapy has really been the best thing for my anxiety because I can learn ways to cope, like ways to cope with the things that trigger me. I can find ways to give myself grace when I'm having anxiety, methods of, practicing ways to reduce it so that I can continue being my best self as a caregiver. So, you know, I'm grateful for this experience of being a caregiver because it's actually shined a bigger light on the anxiety I've always had and given me opportunities to manage it better, I'd say.
Yeah. I was going to ask about what helps you cope. You mentioned therapy, and I so respect that you said that. I mean, obviously, I provide therapy to people. So it's good to hear someone say that they value the therapeutic process and the counseling and that it helps them. What else helps you cope when the weight of this feels overwhelming? Because, and I'm going to back up and also add, because we know that oftentimes therapy is misunderstood and there's apprehension in Black and Brown communities about even engaging in counseling. So, in addition to that, if you want to say more about that, that's fine. But what else helps you cope when the weight of caregiving really like feels heavy?
Well, um, you know, I'm assuming you mean in a healthy manner because I've definitely baked and eaten a lot of whole cheesecakes on my own. I must say that. I don't recommend it, but I'm anyone that's been in my shoes or similar shoes that's provided caregiving, I'm sure has their share of unhealthy coping mechanisms. So, in terms of definitely the healthy ones, I would say respite has been at the top of the list. Like having a break is extremely important. And it may sound cliche, but self-care is really something that you have to, as a caregiver, in my opinion, determine what it looks like for you. For me, self-care does involve a multitude of things. Um, Obviously, therapy, as I mentioned, is one. Breaks away from caregiving is another, so respite time. And I'm very blessed that my mom is enrolled in a program called PACE. It's called the program, I'm sorry, program of all-inclusive care for the elderly. And the PACE program is a national program. It doesn't exist in every state or city, but it's pretty widespread, and they provide adult daycare services and respite. So that time able to get the respite and the breaks away that I need. Travel is a hobby of mine that at first I thought I would have to stop doing when I became a caregiver. And I kind of resigned myself to that as being a fact. And I actually kind of got a little bit depressed about it. But to be honest, I have come full circle and shifted my mindset. And now my mom travels with me. So we'll be in California next month. Actually, the shirt that says Portugal on it right now is because I took her there with me for a full month. So there's a lot of fun and exciting things that we do, together now that we live together, which I'm happy to say. But I will close out in terms of the things that help me and say that a lot of the other cliched stuff really doesn't make a big difference. Stuff like, for me, I call the big three: sleep, exercise, nutrition. It's really important for me that I'm getting proper rest and that, I'm eating as good as I can and being active. That doesn't mean anything extreme. Sometimes it's just getting out for a 15-minute walk. Online support groups. There's several Facebook groups I found to be really helpful. And journaling is something I don't do as much as I would like to, but whenever I do, it helps a whole lot too. So I know that was a lot, but to me, I think all of these things will be important for any caregiver to employ in their day-to-day life, in order to cope personally.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds like what I'm hearing is that you really need a balance. There's not just one single thing. It's not just therapy. It's not just trying to maintain your own hobbies. It's not just physical. It's like bio, psycho, social, spiritual. It's all of that, right?
Hmm. It
Yeah.
would say. mean, honestly, the biggest factor for me personally is my faith in God. I do happen to believe in God. I'm a Christian. I believe that God has a plan in everything, that He uses things for our own good, even when we don't know, and for the good of others in ways we don't necessarily understand or are privy to. So, He's definitely been growing me throughout this process. Through this stage in my life, I've seen many ways that He has shown me to be a better person, like in growing my patience, in putting the focus on how important it is to take care of this one body He's given me. Um, shining the light on the importance of giving my burdens to Him, and boundary setting was something I never thought I didn't even think much about it at all. But when I became a caregiver, I had to learn to boundary set in many ways. So yeah, I would say that's a big he brings all of those things together for me. And
Yeah.
so I'm very grateful for having God in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking now from a cultural and a historical perspective. Do you think there's an unspoken expectation in our communities that we take care of our own in our home? And how does that shape the caregiving experience? Just in your opinion, what do you think?
I would actually say, in short, yes, I actually do think there is a bit of an unspoken expectation in our communities that we care for our own. I actually don't think, however, that it's necessarily a bad thing per se. I tend to think we come from a history that is very, I would describe it as communal in nature. When you hear that phrase, it takes a village.
Mhm.
I think that, there's a lot associated with that phrase, and it kind of speaks to how we do come from, strong communities. And in terms of how it shapes the caregiving experience, I would say for those caregivers where the external expectations rather, play like the contributing factor, like a major role in them deciding to become a caregiver. Um, I think that can be a little bit tough for caregivers who end up making a decision to do this based mostly out of expectations and pressure. And I say that because if that's your major motivator, it can make it feel like you're doing this out of obligation, which can make things a little bit more challenging, in my opinion.
Yeah. Um, the family pressure is what you're speaking of. If a person is not absolutely certain and convinced that that's what they want to do, but they feel a sense of pressure from other family members, that would really add, as you said, that sense of obligation that creates an additional burden to the caregiving task. Yeah.
Fortunate in that the I had the time and space to make this decision myself and without a whole
Mhm.
lot of pressure, just because I took the time that my mother was in the nursing home for a year and a half. That was time I took to actually decide, like observe the progress she was making within therapy, and come to the conclusion, is it something that I can actually take into the home environment and do with her, right? Not everybody has that privilege. So there's a lot of pressure when people get admitted to the hospital with something major, for the hospitals to discharge them quickly. And a lot of the times the hospital system will even put the pressure on the family member to provide a caregiving atmosphere for the person, whether or not they're ready to do so. I experienced that myself firsthand and had to push back on the hospital to continue my mom's care outside of the hospital setting, but in the nursing facility. Had I not had the knowledge of the importance of pushing back, I may have been put into this situation without being able to make it my own decision as much as I would have preferred to.
Yeah. Someone who doesn't know that they can push back would have felt like they didn't have a choice, and that would have added to the pressure. Absolutely. What do you want counselors and healthcare providers and even policymakers to better understand about the needs of Black caregivers?
Our needs are different.
Tell us
And
about
you
that.
did,
Yeah.
yeah, you did an amazing job touching on, you know, a lot of the statistics associated with caregivers and like our community in particular. And the reality is, you know, Black caregivers are, they are much more prone to being discriminated against if you are someone that needs to take time off, for instance, to tend to caregiving responsibilities. You are more likely, as an African American caregiver, to struggle with finances. We all know that as an African American woman, for example, just being a woman alone, you are more than likely to make a lower salary than your Caucasian counterparts, right? So that automatically puts you in a riskier position, so to speak.
Mm.
So I think that because of, you know, us coming from a background, again, that is very communal in nature, and there's this whole strong Black woman trope as well that we're kind of expected to bear all. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of us have the pressure to do things without asking for help. And that's without even mentioning the fact that we are in just living in the US alone. We're in a very independent society and culture where the whole it takes a village phrase doesn't necessarily apply these days the way it maybe did a very long time ago for even our own community. So, what I think is important to know for healthcare providers, counselors, policymakers, all of the above, is we need resources that may look different from others. And if I tie it back in to say to use PACE as an example, the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, I was very fortunate to be someone that I'm a researcher actually by nature, and in my profession I've done a lot of research. So I was able to employ the research side of me to finding out about this organization and what they do. And they've been my biggest source of support in health. But how many other Black caregivers know about this? I I have no idea. It doesn't seem like something that's like advertised per se heavily. I think there needs to be a lot of resources employed towards providing community support for people that are in my position.
Yeah. So we need to encourage people to, and even help people, if say like counselors, to identify resources and let them know that there are resources out there, but you do have to dig. And perhaps we need some of these resource providers to increase their visibility
Absolutely.
and, dare I say, marketing to people of color. And maybe even do some focus groups to determine the needs of various communities, because the needs in every culture and community may differ. So I'm thinking, yeah, let's encourage whoever's providing any kind of a service to really hone in on what specific cultural, racial, ethnic, demographic groups may need. I have such respect for you. I was gonna double back and mention, you said you've taken your mother on vacations all the way to Portugal. And you mentioned, did you say California? You said you mentioned,
She doesn't know. It's a surprise yet. She doesn't know yet.
ah,
It's a surprise. But
okay.
yeah, I'm gonna be taking her to California next month. But we've been to Miami together. We go to Atlanta all the time, and Charlotte's like a little bit over an hour away, so we make weekend trips there. We went to Minneapolis earlier this year for a trip to Minneapolis. So we travel.
That's amazing, because I heard you say that your mom essentially uses a mobile chair, a wheelchair
She
for
does.
mobility,
Mhm.
and she only has use of one hand. She's paralyzed, partially paralyzed on one side, and
Yeah.
you still find the resources and whatever else you need to give her these meaningful experiences. Now, everyone maybe can't do that for a number of reasons, but the fact that you figured it out how to make it work for you and for her, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Have you thought about providing any kind of consultation or supports or like anything for other family members? I'm putting you on the spot here, but have you ever thought of that? Because you're doing such an amazing job.
Actually, and you're actually the first person to ask me that because I've had a couple of friends tell me they're like, Jade, you do a really good job at teaching. You also, have this experience with research and you're very resourceful and you do kind of like figure things out no matter what comes your way, which has been, part of what I do for work, but also just I think an inherent quality of mine. So I've been tossing around some ideas, like whether it be doing a YouTube channel that focuses on learning how to care, because nobody gives you a guide on becoming a caregiver, right? Nobody gave me one. And, I'm always figuring things out as I go, but I think it's really important to have community where people can share their experiences, things that they've learned, and have a sort of forum where different people can share very important knowledge amongst each other and with caregivers in particular, whether it be a community of people that provide knowledge on the therapy, wellness end of things, as well as the financial resources and social resources side of things. But I'm still mulling over that, to be honest. So I'm not sure where these thoughts will take me. But yes, I've actually had some like individual conversations with people here and there regarding steps they should take for newer caregivers. So although I don't have anything in place like as of today, I think I'm very close to wrapping my head around and actualizing what I may be able to do to provide support for people in similar shoes to mine. So we'll see. Appreciate the question.
Yeah, well, keep me posted so I can keep my audience posted on where that goes because I know there's tons of people who feel like they're on the edge of burnout every single day and they just don't know like where to turn, what's out there, what they should do, how they should be feeling. Is it okay to feel angry? Is it okay to feel resentment? Is it okay? And begin to feel guilty about what they feel. They feel guilty about their anxiety. They feel guilty about the sense of hopelessness that sometimes befalls them.
Yeah.
And the supports to know that they're not alone. And what I find also, and we didn't talk about this yet, but many times the caregiving responsibility falls on one person in the family. It is often not shared. And for family members if you're a caregiver and you've got family support, you're fortunate because many caregivers find that they are in that role and feel like the weight of all the family responsibility or what could be shared falls on one person or one household.
I
That's
totally
heavy.
agree with that. I've seen it happen more than once. And that's why I emphasize that community support is extremely valuable and important. I can't say it enough because even if you have like one or two other people in the family that can help every now and then, there's nothing like having organized um, support through like some sort of agency that has the staffing, the funding, the resources, the contacts, the connects to help you whenever you need it. Because even your backup family member probably has a job or a family, at minimum, maybe a pet, or, who knows things to do during a time where you reach out to them, right? So Yes, some of us are very fortunate. I happen to be a solo caregiver, so I am taking on the responsibility of pretty much everything with my mom. I know I do have people that would be helpful to step in with some things, but you know, it's it's a very difficult thing to do alone. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. What does resilience look like to you as a Black caregiver in this season of life? What, in the midst of carrying this weight, resilience, what is it? What's that look like? How do you achieve it? How do you find it?
Definition that I looked at, I actually saw something interesting. And the definition at the very end of it, it mentioned resilience doesn't prevent suffering, but rather involves working through it and continuing to move towards goals. And I don't necessarily know exactly why that hit so hard for me. It really hit home hearing that. It doesn't mean that you won't have challenges. It means putting focus and emphasis on how do you get through them. And so what resilience looks like to me is I'm talking to you about this right now, what it looks like is giving myself grace. Um, that's a word I always have to keep coming back to as a caregiver because anyone that's taken on this role has done it out of love for their loved one. And that love drives and pushes them to do as much as they can to give their loved one as good of a quality of life as they can as a caregiver. And in doing that, things can sometimes get very challenging. So to me, resilience means knowing that even when things get tough and you're not providing that love on any given day in the perfect way or in the way your loved one wants or expects it or the way that somebody else thinks that you should be doing it, give yourself grace to work through those days and knowing that you're still doing your best. Um, Giving yourself grace to know that you aren't perfect, just like no one else is. So your caregiving experience is not gonna look perfect. But being able to recognize and acknowledge the good days and have gratitude for the things that you still have, allowing that grace combined with that gratitude to be the things that push you towards working through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Words to the wise and a wonderful way to end our conversation. Jade Irving, thank you for talking with us today, for sharing your story. And I got to tell you, you and the millions of others around the world in this position, in my opinion, are the unsung heroes of our time because
Um,
the I'm a baby boomer, late in the baby boom cycle, but baby boomers are in that age range where they're needing this level of care. And
mhm.
baby boomers, we're the largest generational cohort in history. So there are
Wow.
a lot of people, yeah, a lot of people who are in this age range and needing the kinds of supports. So that means that there are millions of people around the world in this position. Absolutely unsung heroes of our time. I'm gonna put this out there too. You know, I grew up in traditional Black Baptist church traditions, and I have seen lots of people appreciate it in the church. You obviously see pastors appreciated as they should be, but you even have like ushers appreciation, and that's fine. That's nice.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they do serve. But when I was growing up, you had Nurses Day, you had Choir Day, you had all these days for all all the different
Mm-hmm.
groups in the church. I would love to see in our day and age churches begin to have caregiver appreciation days
Yeah.
to thank the people in the congregation who care for their own loved ones and community members and whatnot, and not for the sake of parading and flaunting, not that, but it can be a thankless job because sometimes the people receiving care, especially with different forms of dementia, don't always show gratitude. Sometimes personality changes cause them to be more unkind to their caregivers than they are kind. And I think caregivers need someone to say, hey, you got a hard job, but thank you for taking care of people in our community who need more than, or who are carrying more than the average burden, put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, those are the kinds of things that communities can do. I don't know if you agree, but what
Mhm.
are your thoughts?
I do agree. And I just kind of chuckle to myself when you say it's a thankless job because it is because people always want to know how is the loved one that the caregiver is caring for is doing. And I find that no one ever asks me. I can't say no one. Let me not say that. It's very rare that I get the question, well, what about you from the same people who are asking, like, what about my mom? And I get it, because she's like the one that's had the stroke. Um, but being a caregiver is tough, and yes, thankfulness and gratitude and all that kind of thing from externally, it goes a long way. And I don't know if you have you heard this quote by I had to look it up earlier today because I meant to tell it to someone else and I was trying to find out who said it. And it's by former First Lady Rosalind Carter. And the quote goes, there are only four kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So
Mm,
I am someone that
mm,
believes that caregiving
mm,
impacts everyone. And that
mm.
quote alone summarizes, I think, very eloquently for me how it impacts everyone. And I think if everyone would take a moment to just think about this kind of quote, which is actually stating what I would consider to be a fact. When you think about how caregiving impacts everyone, yeah, it's important for us to take steps to recognize the value that, caregivers bring. For sure.
Yeah. Caring for a parent or even a spouse. We didn't talk about that, but caregiving for anybody, a grandparent, a parent, a spouse with dementia or with a disability it's absolutely one of the hardest journeys and probably one of the most sacred acts of love that could be offered. And for Black caregivers, that journey is layered with, as we talked about, the cultural expectations, the systemic gaps, and the legacy, even, oh, this could be a whole nother episode, the legacy of unhealed history in our families. So there's so much more that we could unpack, but you've certainly helped us to think today about how we can improve systems and how we can be more sensitive to the needs of caregivers and the emotional weight and burden that they carry. I hope today's conversation shed light on both that weight and the worth of this role. And if you are a caregiver, know that your labor of love is not invisible. You deserve rest. You deserve resources. You deserve recognition. You don't do it for recognition, but boy, do we owe a debt of gratitude to the caregivers in our society today. So let's keep this conversation going. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Let's work together to help build the systems that see and honor and support the caregivers in our communities. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to like or make a comment, subscribe, share, do whatever platform you're you're watching it on, do whatever that platform allows to say, yeah, give it a thumbs up or a love. And until next time, remember to maintain a multicultural mindset. You can't erase culture. You can't cancel culture. Uh, let's be committed to honoring diversity, even when it comes into question. And today we've talked about the mindset of Black caregivers and the mindset of those who can come alongside and support Black caregivers. So thank you for watching, Jade. Thank you again for being on the Multicultural Mindset today. Remember, you don't carry this alone. And for the counselors and support people, remember, there are unique needs and there are unique ways that you can provide support. That's all we want to say for now. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.